Hello, my dear students. Stay home and stay safe. Today we will continue the friction chapter. Sorry, students. A previous day I forgot to explain the topic wheels reduce the friction. So today we are going to discuss about the wheels reduce the friction. Actually, the friction can be reduced by using the wheels to move objects. It is quite difficult to move a heavy suitcase by dragging it on the ground because the sliding friction between the heavy suitcase and the ground is very large. If this very suitcase is fitted with small wheels, you can see in figure 12.14, then it can be pulled. That means, I repeat again, if this heavy suitcase is fitted with small wheels, then it can be pulled very easily, because when we attached wheels, then sliding friction is converted into rolling friction, and rolling friction between the wheels of suitcase and the ground is much less. Friction can be reduced by attaching wheels to move the object. Next, friction can be reduced by using ball bearing between the moving part of the machine. Ball bearing is a device which consists of a ring of small metal balls. The small metal balls of a ball bearing can roll freely. They are designed to make the moving parts of a machine to roll over each other rather than the slide. The ball bearing is introduced between the two surfaces which have to rotate over each other. The axle is fixed on the inner side of a ball bearing and wheels is fixed to the outer side of the ball bearing. They reduce, that means the ball bearing reduce friction by making the two surfaces. The surfaces are axle and the wheel to roll over each other. This happens due to the rolling action of small metal balls present inside the ball bearing. You can see in figure 12.16. Even a wheel produces some friction where its central hole rubs with the axle. To reduce the friction still further, wheels are mounted on the ball bearing. The ball bearing is fixed between the rub of wheel and axle. When the wheel revolves, the balls of ball bearing roll and reduce the friction. The uses of ball bearing makes the wheel roll smoothly over the axle. In the most of the machine, friction friction is reduced by using ball bearing. The wheels of the bicycle turn on sets of the ball bearing. This ball bearing reduce the friction because they roll rather than slide. Now, next one is our topic is fluid friction. What is fluid? I explain again. Already I discussed lower classes what is fluid. Those substances which are able to flow easily are called fluid. Water and air are the most common fluids. There is a friction whenever an object moves through a fluid. It is called fluid friction. Air is a very light and thin, yet it exerts frictional force on the object moves through the air. It pushes the air out of the way and air pushes back on the object. This push of the air on the moving object creates friction which tends to slow down the moving object. Air exerts frictional force on cars, buses, aeroplanes, rockets, and birds moving through it. Water exert force of friction on object which move through them and opposite their motion. When an object moves, hence you can say when an object moves through water, it pushes the water out of the way and the water pushes back on the object. This push of water on the moving object create friction which tends to slow down the moving object. Water exert frictional force on the object. You can take the example boats, speedboats, submarine, fishes which move through it. That means inside the water. The frictional force exerted by a fluid is called drag. Called drag. Drag is a kind of frictional force exerted by the fluid which opposes the motion of the object through that fluid. Drag force acts in direction opposite to the direction of the motion of the object. Example of the drag force are the air resistance force experienced by a car or an aeroplane when they move at high speed, and water resistance force experienced by a speedboat moving rapidly in the sea. Generally, the magnitude of the frictional force or the drag exerted by the fluid on the object moving through it depends on the speed of the object, shape of the object, and size of the object. And another important thing, nature of the fluid, that means density of the fluid or the viscosity of the fluid. Hence, first point, higher the speed of an object moving to a fluid, greater will be the frictional force acting on it. Second point, you can say the objects having streamlined shape face much less friction. You can see here shape of the birds and the shape of the plane. Streamlined shape, this one. The object having streamlined shape face much less friction and force or drag when the moving through a fluid than the object which do not have streamlined shape. You can take example, a car has a streamlined shape due to which it faces much less frictional force of the air while running by high speed, running at high speed. Bus does not have a streamlined shape, so it encounters a much greater frictional force from air while running at the same speed. Larger the size of the object moving through a fluid, greater will be the frictional force or the drag acting on it, you can say. Another next point, 4 number point, higher the viscosity or the thickness or the density of the fluid, greater will be the frictional force or the drag acting on an object moving through it. Example, water is much more viscous than air, so there will be much more frictional force or drag on an object when it moves through water than when it moves through air. Now, disadvantages of the fluid friction. The main disadvantage of the fluid frictions are: number one point, it reduces the speed of the objects moving through the fluids. Second point, when the objects move through the fluids, they lose some of their energy in overcoming the fluid friction. This decreases their efficiency. When a car is running on the road, then some of the energy of the car is used up and lost in overcoming this friction of the air, which oppose its motion. When a speedboat rushes through water, then some of its energy is used up or lost in overcoming the friction of water, you can say. A body shape which offers very little resistance to the flow of air or water around it is called streamlined shape. What is streamlined shape object, or what is streamlined shape? This one is very important question. A body shape which offers very little resistance to the flow of air or water around it is called streamlined shape. A streamlined shape is like thin wedge or triangular objects lying on its base and sloping upwards gradually. Now, the method of reducing fluid friction. Fluid friction or drag can be reduced or minimized by giving special shape called streamline shape to the object which move through the fluids like air or water. You can take another example of the streamlined objects. Dolphins are streamlined by nature to reduce the friction with water in which they move. The objects such as boats, speedboats, ships, and the submarines which move in water are also built with a streamlined object shape to reduce the frictional force of water and make the move easily through water. Okay, students, our friction chapter finished now. Next day we will discuss about the question answer, exercise question answer from your science success book. That means your book. This one is NCERT book. Then next day I will discuss the question answer from the science success book.